Hi everyone. In this Sup with SAP video, we're going to explore the procurement process, where we buy an item from a vendor, receive that item into inventory, and then pay for the purchase. Let's go ahead and get started. For this process, we're going to start at the very beginning, and the very first transaction we're going to look at is the purchase requisition. This would typically be generated by someone who's managing inventory, or it could be something that is generated automatically through a production process or a sales process. We're obviously going to be doing all of these steps manually today. So the first transaction we're going to be looking at is a purchase requisition. And if you want to navigate to it in the menu choices, it's in logistics, in materials management, in purchasing, and then it's in the purchase requisitions folder. And specifically, we're going to be creating a brand new purchase requisition from scratch. The transaction code is ME51N. Depending on whether you have done this transaction before or not, your view might look a little bit different than my screen. What I like to do is explore the item overview area. I don't typically use the individual item area, and I usually leave the header collapsed to start with. So you want something like this. So we're going to create a purchase requisition where somebody is requesting that we buy an item. And in this case, I'm specifically going to request a shirt, and I'm requesting my shirts. And I'm just going to keep the quantity pretty small. I'm going to ask for 10 shirts. And I'm going to ask for these items to be delivered to my Miami plant. And while we don't have to enter any more information in the purchase requisition, which is just a request, I'm going to go ahead and enter the storage location. I know that things like t-shirts and first aid kits and that sort of thing go into trade goods, so I'm going to enter the storage location TG00. I'm not going to enter anything like the vendor, the material group, delivery dates, any of those sorts of things. I'm going to leave them all blank. I'm going to go ahead and click the green checkbox to let the system check my work. I will get a warning message about can the delivery date be met, and the delivery date has been set 1 day from when I'm recording this video. In this case, we're not worried about that. We're going to ignore any kind of delivery date delays or anything along those lines, so that's just a warning, it's not an error, and we can move forward from this step. So at this point, I'm happy with the results, and I'm going to go ahead and click Save. And I am going to record my purchase requisition number. I typically just record my transaction numbers out to a notepad so that I have a place to reference them in the future. Step 2 in the purchasing or procurement process is creating an actual purchase order. And so instead of being in the purchase requisition folder, we can navigate to the purchase order folder and create a brand new purchase order. And in this case, the transaction code is ME21N, where we're going to know the vendor that we're going to buy from. Depending on whether you've used a purchase order before or not, your view might be slightly different. I suggest that you expand the item overview area. In some cases, you will start with a purchase order. You'll actually skip the purchase requisition step. But in this case, I already have a purchase requisition that I'm going to build from. So I'm going to take the information from the purchase requisition and allow it to inform my purchase order. In that case, what I need to do is click on the Document Overview On button. If you did not have this panel on the left-hand side of your screen already displayed, click on that Document Overview On button. Mine now says Document Overview Off. This is obviously just a button that toggles that panel on and off. I'm going to suggest for this semester that you just leave it on. It doesn't cause any harm, and you may be using it on a fairly regular basis. There are 2 steps for adopting a purchase requisition. The first is to click on the leftmost button in that left panel, and when you hover over it, you'll see Selection Variant. And to me, this button looks like a bunch of balloons that are floating in the sky. I'm going to click on that button, and I'm going to choose to adopt from purchase requisitions. So the little drop-down menu that shows up, I'm choosing purchase requisitions. And then I'm going to use whatever filters I need to find that purchase requisition. Now, I happen to know the purchase requisition number, and you can see it's been filled in for me. So has material. If for some reason that document number hadn't been filled in, you could obviously type it in. Or if you couldn't remember what the purchase requisition number was, you could go search for all your purchase requisitions based upon a particular material and find the appropriate purchase requisition number. But in this case, we're in good shape. I'm going to go ahead and click the Execute button up top, which looks like a clock with a checkbox. My purchase requisition number will show up over here in this left panel. So I'm going to check the box next to it, and then I'm going to click on the middle button at the top, which says Adopt. And what this does is it takes all the information from the purchase requisition and populates the purchase order with the appropriate information. So you see that some of the information now shows up in my purchase order. At this stage, I'm getting a red error message, basically a stop sign. And that is because I did not yet enter my purchasing organization. The purchasing group populated and my company code populated. Had they not, I would want to type those in as well. But what did not automatically populate is my purchasing organization. In our class, we are always going to type US00. We're purchasing for Global Bike in the US. And if you type that and click the green checkbox, that error will go away. I have another error, which is that I have not indicated what vendor I'm going to be buying from. And so, of course, I have to choose a vendor. In this case, I'm going to search for my vendors. My search term is just going to be a wildcard for my vendors. And I am delivering to the Miami plant, so I'm going to find a provider of goods on the East Coast. So a small test of your geography. I'm specifically going to choose Olympic Protective Gear 101 and then my 3 digits. So when you find your vendor, you can just double click on them to populate them in the vendor field. If you already know the number of your vendor, of course, you can just type it manually. I'm going to click the green checkbox again. And in this particular example, I'm getting one more error message, which is that I have not entered a price for these shirts. If you've purchased an item before in the past, the net price might automatically populate for you. But in this case, my price has not populated. So in the top panel, I need to type a net price. This is the price for an individual unit. This is not the price for the entire order. I'm ordering 10 shirts. Shirts are $15 a piece. I'm going to enter the price for a single shirt, which is $15. Don't type 150. Don't do the math. Just type the unit price for an individual item. As an aside, the place where you would find the net price for an item you've never purchased before is in the Material Master document, and I'm going to show that to you right now. If I choose a new window and I type MM03, I can go look up this particular material, shirts in this case, and the view you're interested in for determining the price of an item you're trying to buy is Accounting 1. It's the only view you're interested in. You'll have to specify the plant where you want to receive the information. In this case, it's Miami. And what you're looking for is the moving price. And you can see the moving price for shirts is $15. So I'm going to use that as the price for the unit, the item that I'm trying to buy in my purchase order. And you can do this for any item for the remainder of the semester. So I've entered my net price of $15. I click my green checkbox yet one more time. All of the red errors have disappeared. You can see lots of green lights. You do see one orange triangle. It's a warning about the delivery date. And again, we're not going to worry about those warnings. I think everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and click my Save button. And I'm going to record my purchase order number just in case I need it in the future. Step 3 in our procurement process is receiving the goods from our vendor. Typically, this would take a few days, but in our unique virtual environment, we receive things almost instantaneously. So I'm going to go ahead and pursue the receipt of these goods. This is going to be a transaction code that we use in lots of different places throughout the semester, and I can navigate to it in lots of different locations. Rather than navigate to a specific folder, since it's located in lots of different places, I'm just going to give you the code, which is MIGO, M-I-G-O, not zero, M-I-G-O. We're going to use MIGO in lots of different ways. So it's important once you open up this transaction that you pay attention to what the specific menu choices are up top. They're both highlighted in red right now on my screen. And these current choices are the ones I'm interested in. This is going to be a goods receipt, or receiving items, from a purchase order. We bought something from an external vendor. So that's great. That's exactly what I want. I need to paste in the purchase order number. Now, I just copied and pasted it to my notepad, so it's going to be pretty easy for me to just paste it in. If you couldn't remember, you could certainly use the search button to go try to find it based upon a specific item or a specific vendor until you identified the PO number. It's always going to start with 45, and then the last couple digits will continue to climb as we move through the semester and we generate more and more purchase orders. Once you've entered the purchase order number and ensured that your two drop-downs are correct, goods receipt, purchase order, you can go ahead and click the green checkbox. If your middle panel is gray, like mine is right now, you can't modify anything. You can't click on anything, you can't change anything. And that might be okay, but if you do want to modify anything in here, the way that you get access to this middle panel is by collapsing the detail data at the bottom. So if I collapse that panel at the bottom, you'll see that now I have access to the middle panel. I'm going to only do that once. I typically don't have the detail data open. If for some reason it shows up again in the future, I'll remember to collapse it, and then I'll have access to this information. So just a little note. I'm going to go ahead and click the OK button for these t-shirts. What I'm effectively doing is I'm pretending that I'm on the loading dock. I'm looking at a box that showed up on a truck. I open it up, I look inside, I examine the 10 t-shirts, and they look okay to me. So I've received these goods, and I am verifying that they are acceptable. We're never going to do anything different in this class, but it's certainly possible that you could receive things and move them into quality inspection, or you could look at them and say that they're somehow damaged and move them to blocked stock. That's not something we'll pursue in this class, but that's certainly something that's realistic in a real-world situation. I'm good with this, so I'm going to go ahead and click Post. That generates a material document. I never need the material document number directly, so I'm not going to copy and paste it to my notepad. I'm just happy that this went through. And in a later video, we will use some exploratory transactions to see how all of this results in changes in inventory. But we're not going to do that for this video. We're just working through the process. But we did receive the 10 items into inventory, so Miami now has 10 shirts that they didn't have a few minutes ago. We're now done with moving actual items, but we need to pursue the movement of the money. So there are two more transactions for purchasing. The first is receiving and verifying the invoice, and the second is then making a payment to the vendor. Let's take a look at the receive and verify invoice step. To find this transaction code, you would go to Logistics, and then Materials Management, and then you would go to the Logistics Invoice Verification folder, Document Entry, and the transaction we're interested in is MIRO, M-I-R-O, where we enter an invoice. There are a variety of different data points we need to enter. You need to enter the invoice date. I always choose today's date, so you're going to see me click on the search button and immediately click the green checkbox, which will highlight the date where I'm recording this video. I'm going to need to enter the PO number down in the bottom panel. Again, that is that number that starts with a 45 that I copied to my notepad. So I'm going to paste that in and click the green checkbox. That will populate this invoice with that specific PO. It's also going to then show how much we think we owe that company, $150 in this case. I received these shirts and they turned out to be okay, so I'm going to agree to owing them the full amount. So I'm going to enter a positive 150 in amount right here and click the green checkbox one more time. What you want on this screen is you want a balance of 0 with a green light next to it. That indicates that you've agreed to pay them the full amount for your purchase that you received earlier. I'm going to go ahead and click the Save button. This generates a accounting document in the background starting with the number 51. Again, I never need to access that number directly, so I'm not copying it and pasting it to my notepad file, but this does mean that now the accounting department in our fictitious company has agreed to pay this invoice, and somebody in accounts payable will have to send some money to the vendor that we purchased from. And that leads us to our last transaction code, which is making a payment to a vendor. This is not in logistics. This is an accounting transaction. It is in financial accounting. It's an accounts payable activity. Specifically, we're going to do document entry, and we're going to make an outgoing payment. And the transaction code is F53. And you'll note as we move through the semester that unlike all the other transaction codes that follow a particular pattern, the accounting transaction codes do not. So we're going to use 2. F53 is where we send money, and F28 is where we receive money. And there is no rhyme or reason that I'm aware of for why they choose these odd numbers, which are much different than everything else in the system. F53 is our send money to a vendor code. Again, you have some entries you need to make. The document date's going to be today's date. The account number, unlike almost everything we do this semester where you enter your own unique code, all of us share the same bank account. It is 100000. Once you've entered it once, it should show up as you start typing, and you can just highlight it and choose it. Never deviate from this. You do not enter your own 3-digit code at the end of this. We all share the same bank account. You'll need to enter the amount that you owe a specific vendor. I remember that I owe $150, but if I didn't, I'd have to go back to one of my previous documents and go look this information up. We owe $150 for 10 shirts. And in the bottom panel, the account number is the vendor that you are paying. And again, you need to remember this or go look it up. We are dealing with vendor 101 and then your 3 digits. This is unique. You need to enter your own 3 digits down here. Once you've entered all this information, you're going to click on the Process Open Items button. If you've done this correctly, a single document number will show up in this second screen. Starts with a 51, and the amount that you owe should be the amount that you entered in the previous screen, and you should see that there's nothing that's not assigned. You're agreeing to pay and are actually paying the full amount you owe to this vendor. If you see any discrepancies, if at the bottom instead of saying 150 it said 180, you can't proceed. You need to back out of this system, go back to the previous screen, and enter the appropriate amount. So if it's 180, change it to 180. The only way that Global Bike works is that you pay the full amount to the vendor that you owe. If for some reason you had an outstanding invoice from a previous order, and so instead of owing 150, you owe 450, you need to enter that full amount and pay all of the invoices all at once. The outgoing payments doesn't handle anything but the exact amount in the way that Global Bike is configured in SAP for this class. So you need to make sure that not assigned comes up with 0 in order to proceed. Mine does. I can go ahead and click Save. And now I have completed the procurement process in SAP. The main steps: creating a purchase requisition, creating a purchase order, receiving our items into inventory, verifying our invoice, and then paying our vendor. There are lots of other sub-steps that we can discuss, but we'll do that in a later video. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.